Hello, Gut Check Project fans and KBMD Health family. Welcome to episode number 64. I'm your host, Eric Rieger, joined by my awesome co-host, Dr. Kenneth Brown. And honestly, you got an awesome intro to make here for everybody.
Yeah, so we're super excited. This is something I'm extremely passionate about because we have the CEO and the lead scientist for a product that I believe in, I love, I have my patients use, I have my staff use, I have all my family use, and it is called Brain.FM. This, if you have any trouble focusing, if you have any trouble sleeping, if you have any trouble with anxiety, there is a really cool way to correct this. And we've got the owner and CEO, Dan Clark, here, and Kevin J.P. Woods, Ph.D. Super smart. And they're going to explain to us why, well, quite honestly, why it's so effective on me, why it's so effective on my patients. And one of the most exciting things, we've been trying to do this for quite a while now. Pre-pandemic, we realized, Eric and I realized that when we tried this on a few patients at the endoscopy suite, not only did patients have a better experience, they were calm going into it, they woke up quicker, and almost ubiquitously, every patient loved it.
Without question.
And so I'm so excited because they're here in town visiting from New York because we're going to end up actually doing an official study where I think it's going to be groundbreaking. I think we're going to be able to change how people feel about outpatient procedures like colonoscopies, decrease the anxiety, and it's not just anecdotal, it's because there's science behind it. There is a growing movement with this, and I am just absolutely thrilled. Episode 64 is probably going to be our biggest episode ever to date.
I would imagine so, and I don't want to take away time from y'all feeding in, but just so that y'all know, this is 20 months in the making. I mean, coronavirus, COVID hit, and derailed all of our effort to really, we should be 20 months further down the road of actually implementing this, and it's really for patient benefit, which is what we talk about here all of the time. This will enhance the experience, I believe, for people who come through and have procedures. So, Dan, Kevin JP, what's happening?
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks for coming all the way down to Texas. How's Dallas?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nice.
At least
than I thought.
my first time in Texas, everything is enormous. The streets are 3 times as wide as they are in New York. I try to cross the street and I just keep on walking. It's amazing.
Well, awesome. So yesterday was your first time to join us at the GI suite.
Yep.
And honestly, I don't want to steal anything, but what was your impression that you thought that you might see on an application of your technology? And then how do you see it fitting in, kind of how Ken and I have been trying to experience it ourselves?
Yeah, sure. So first, let's maybe tell everyone what the technology is, and then we can talk about how we jumped in and started this whole process.
Let's do it.
I think the backstory is actually interesting. So basically, BrainFM, we make functional music designed to help people focus, relax, or sleep better. And mostly, we have a consumer product where we have 2 million people that use us to jump into focus or switch into relax or help them sleep. And we've been having really great success there. We have papers and some things in review in Nature, which we're really excited about. So it's evidence and science-backed. And there's some really novel ways which we use music to basically switch you into that state. And I'll let Kevin jump into that, maybe come back to that and some of the science. But what's interesting is while we're chugging ahead on that, what my girlfriend actually, she starts going to get a tonsillectomy. And she signs her life to me. We're dating for 6 months. I now know we're in a serious relationship. And I realized that I'm terrified, and I'm not even getting surgery, and she's very scared. She's never been under before. And I realized at that point that we can use the same things that we're using science to advance on our consumer angle. We can use it in relax in a medical grade setting. I remember calling up Kevin and saying, hey, can we do anything? And he starts looking at the literature. He starts looking at other things. He goes, yes. And I actually think we can improve it a lot. I pitched that to you guys when we met.
Yeah.
I think we met probably 3 months later, just out of coincidence. And you loved the idea. And that's when we came here. So it's really cool. It's been definitely a long time in the making, but it was amazing when we were doing it some yesterday. And that one gentleman woke up and he was almost emotional. He was so happy. He's like, every single time I wake up, this is like the worst or most traumatic thing that can happen. And I was using this music, and I woke up, and it was fine.
And he'd done this several times before without music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we're trying to do is how do we help people relax into surgery and then wake up non-groggy, alert, and being able to get on with their lives without, making this traumatic. Because a lot of people are so scared. And I know for me personally, it was really cool to see you guys doing the art form that you have, because I was able to see that it isn't scary. There's this almost like divider between people that are non-medical and medical have. And for being able to cross over it and bringing a bridge using some of our music, I think is really what we're set up to do.
So it's interesting that honestly, it was really awesome, I think, that the first person that y'all got to see feedback from was somebody who was so engaged and immediately wanted to tell y'all about it. And I only just want to, just so the audience understands exactly what Dan's describing, because it was awesome. Yep. So Ken and I saw this multiple times before they even got here when we used BrainFM as an experiment. But essentially, this particular patient, he wasn't high anxiety per se for his singular case, but he had a history of waking up erratic, very emotional, hard to console, not very comfortable in his surroundings as he was emerging. He even told y'all he feared how he was going to wake up.
Yep.
How would you describe that you saw him wake up?
My goodness. He was happy. He looked us straight in the eyes and he thanked us on a personal level. And that meant so much. And just knowing that he had those prior experiences and that he saw such an enormous difference. And I remember him saying, how can I recommend this to people? How can I tell people about it? And we said, whoa, hold up. We're not ready for that quite yet. But he was ready to tell the world. He was just so excited.
And the greatest thing is it's non-invasive, meaning that I don't have to inject a new drug. Ken doesn't have to use a new scope tip or something new, gigantic piece of equipment. I mean, this is something that we can apply. Totally. It's practical, and it's gave us real results and appreciable results.
And it's enjoyable too. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing about music, it is familiar to people. They understand it. And yet we have this music with a scientific twist on it, right? I'll dive into the science later, but, it's not exactly the music that but it still is entertaining and fun to listen to, and is something that can distract you while you're, lying there maybe worrying about the procedure you're about to undergo. So, it's art and science coming together in a really special way.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about it is, to Kevin's point, people for thousands of years have always used music to be able to control their environment, right? And there's been people that have tried with this in medical settings, but it's always lacking some of the results, some of the things that are proven in science that this can make a better experience. What we're really trying to do is combine both worlds between auditory neuroscience with Kevin's background and with a product that can be brought into these experiences that is more than a placebo. It's something that is shown to have an effect, and it makes everything better. So it's a win for the patient. It's a win for the clinic. It's a win for everyone involved, because everything just becomes a little bit easier with something that everyone's already used to, which is music.
Ken, I know that whenever you've had conversations with patients before they come in for their very first colonoscopy, the level of fear and anxiety for somebody who simply has never even endured a procedure before can be very real, and oftentimes occupies a lot of the time in the clinic for either you or Megan or one of the nurses or the MAs to really kind of talk them off the ledge. So what have you seen incorporating something like BrainFM so far?
All right, so my personal experience before we even get to the patients, let's just say that what I really like is that my day begins every morning. I start my day, I switch from the evening BrainFM sleep, because I go to sleep with it. So my day begins with switching it to focus. I come down, I do my French press, which I say French press because Eric gifted me this French press. He's like, dude, quit using drip coffee, man. He's like, French press is the way to go. So I boil the water. I have my BrainFM on. I'm in the focus mode. I put that in focus because I know within 5 minutes that my brain is ready to really do this. I put the coffee on. I do the French press, fire up the computer, and then I start looking at my chart. So within 15 minutes, I am literally ready to roll because there's a lot of stuff I have to do. then go to work, go work out, do whatever I do in my day. And then when I come home, then my wife and kids know this, and we all use BrainFM. We all use it for these exact same things. My kids use it to study. I use it to get my day going, and I use it to put myself down. So I'm such a big believer in it that when we had our first, 30 people that we did at the Endo Center, it's very easy to say, hey, trust me on this. I've experimented with it. All my employees use it. I use it. My family uses it. And just like you said, being on the other side of this medical experience, today Nizreen was talking to these guys, and she said, even though I've scheduled tens of thousands of these, when it was my turn to do it, I was nervous. And we gave her BrainFM to do, and she said to you guys that immediately I calmed down. And now she's had several different procedures since then, and she doesn't care at all. She's like, I know I'm going to get in there. I know I'm going to wear this. I'm going to calm down. I know I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to wake up, and it's going to be refreshing, and I'm going to feel good. So she can now tell my patients that. She's like, don't worry about a thing. Because one of the things that really, and you and I talk about this all the time, and we've had several podcasts, colon cancer is the second leading cause of cancer death in the United States. Colon cancer comes from colon polyps. We have a cure. And you saw that yesterday when you were with us. We have a cure. So you and I have this urgency that if you're anxious about having it done, if you're scared, if you know somebody that had colon cancer, if you know somebody that complained about their colonoscopy, anything to get you into the clinic to get those polyps removed because it saves your life. So now when we have this opportunity to offer something to make it a more pleasant experience, not only more pleasant because we're going to get into the science. We keep saying we're going to get into the science because that's the coolest thing. That's the coolest thing. And I want to thank both Envision Healthcare and AmSurge that they're being open-minded about this. I'm really excited to get all my partners in GIA looking at this because I really kind of feel like this is a win-win-win. When we spoke with Dr. Ackerman, who's been co-host multiple times. When we spoke with Dr. Ackerman, he said it. He's like, he goes, it's a no-brainer. It's zero risk, potentially might help. And this is somebody who hasn't used it yet. When he realizes, he's like, oh, when I said potential, I should have changed that word. He's like, it'll help. And that's what we're going to end up trying to figure out. So what I love about it is just a way to say, look, get it done. Any worries you have, I'm going to take one layer of that away the second you show up. And that's what I'm excited about because ultimately it's just a way, if you're worried about it, just make the appointment. We'll handle everything else.
Yep. I think it's interesting too because a lot of people, at least from my experience, right, the first time you're going to something like this, you focus on these negative thoughts that you try to push out of your head. By using music, which we're used to, and again, we'll get into the science. Last time we hear that, but it's something that we can focus on something else. So instead of the fears or something else, we can focus on the music that we're listening to and know that we're in really good hands at a center that's willing to invest in technology and try new things for better patient experience.
I would like to just comment on that right there. A center that's willing to invest in technology. You're exactly right because when you've been meeting with the people, they're saying, we would like to be the Apple version of delivering healthcare like this.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting because if you look at Apple, right, why do people want to be Apple? It's because they do things more. They're not the first to do things always, but they're first to do things extremely well and extremely thought through. So they take their time. They're not, first to market sometimes, but other times they are, and when they are, they're the dominant factor. And I think it comes down to really finding solutions that truly do work, that truly do make a difference, and that are long-term solutions rather than not.
Right.
And when we're talking to other people that are looking to be the Apple of healthcare, it does take an investment. It does take a chance, like a leap of faith into trying something new. But I think that the return on that are exponential in patient satisfaction, repeat visitors, people that are actually showing up for appointments because they're less scared because we have a solution for that. but more with all the other things that we're learning on as byproducts like efficiency and helping. So that's stuff that we're really exciting because it's still focused on patient experience first, but there's so many other things that come from patient experience being better.
Let me get your take on this real quick, since you guys did see this from the other side.
Yeah.
You saw what happens with me and my partners, with the staff, with the camaraderie, how everyone there really is there for one ultimate goal, and that's to take care of people, to help in any way we can, meaning that we can fix diseases. I just want your take on how the patients felt and where they came through, and certainly when we started using the technology. Because people do need to hear, it's easy for a doctor to say, oh, go get this done because you should. But I love that you were like, this is the first time I've seen this. And it's beautiful to watch how you guys as a team, meaning everyone.
Well, I think it really it shines through that's true. And everyone has a great teamwork. From my perspective, it looks like everyone's there because they're like, we have to be players because we're saving people's lives, and that comes in from the RNs that we saw, from the people in the lobby, from how you guys are showing up and giving great bedside manner, joking around, everyone's having a good time because you guys are in a great line of work where you're again saving people's lives. And even just talking to some of the nurses there and RNs, they're not just trying to make the experience where they're processing people. I thought that was really great. Where it's not like, oh, let's get this person with an IV and all these other things as fast as possible. It's like, no, like, okay, you're sensitive. You've never gotten a needle or an IV or whatever. Let me figure out how to make it so it's less obtrusive or less intense. And I thought that was really great. And that's why we're so excited. We're trying to say, hey, we're going to add this BrainFM thing into it. And they're like, that's going to make our job even easier. And that was really fun to see.
I love the fact that that's what you said, because what I see BrainFM being, I know that it's for the patient, but truly the person who's going to see the benefit repeatedly is going to be the nurse who's already trying to be exactly what you said, to make sure that it's not a cattle call for the GI center or really any surgery center that wants to be appealing to the patient, but at the same time allow their staff to all be really, really good at it. Not everybody's great at talking or joking appropriately with a patient to make them come down at ease. But if you could have something that was somewhat of an equalizer, that's been proven and tested, et cetera, it looks to me like something like BrainFM could easily fit that mold, really decreasing the burden on the staff that's checking.
Absolutely. And we were talking earlier about the fellow that we saw yesterday that had this great experience coming out and said that, in previous cases that he'd come out crying and distressed, and you think not only the stress on him, but the stress on the nurses that would have to, deal with him in that situation and calm him down, and how that loads day after day on the nurses that have to deal with that, right? And, to be able to relieve some of that burden is just absolutely enormous. And by the way, and what I saw at the center yesterday was, not only the nurses clearly care about people, but also just extremely efficient, and how quick the process was with people going through, and I'd never been to a GI center like that before, did not know what to expect. We were struck how fast the whole thing was. It was amazing.
I think investing, in something like this is investing in also your employees, because they see that. We were talking to, I believe it was Alexis, and she was like, I see 1,000 people wake up a week, and I'm just today, I can tell you that those people are waking up faster.
Oh yeah.
And that's something which, when especially now trying to hire people in the world that we live in right now, you want to work at a company that is leading the charge and is something that you can feel really good about working there, because not only are they taking care of you, but they're taking care of everyone else. And I think that really shone through yesterday as well.
I think we're really lucky, honestly, Ken, to have GIA in this position to help us do this, because it seems to me like this, and we've talked about this on the show before, but this company wants to be an innovator, not just some big GI group. They want to help establish what should be some good norms instead of some of the throwaway old norms. They want to be the ones that emerge as something. And I think this is only going to pay compliment to that.
Yeah, and I want to point something out when you were talking about the efficiency and all that. What you did see is the efficiency in the preoperative and the postoperative, but you saw in the room that it was consistent. Yes. It was Eric and I focused, my technician, Mackenzie. You guys saw that it's just, it's right there. It's the same process. And so by not worrying about the patient's concerns, or the concerns are alleviated when they come in, and I know that they're going to wake up in competent hands, I get to focus 100% on taking care of what I'm looking at with the endoscope. Eric gets to focus 100% on making sure that that patient is sedated, and I work as a team. And you saw how that is, that the flow of the room, and that's what's beautiful about the center that we're at, that although it's the efficiency, sometimes people think, oh, well, that feels like you're moving too fast. No, the spot where we slow down is in that room.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, we definitely saw that. And yeah, by efficiency, I just meant as somebody coming into the center for a procedure, I would be out of there in less than an hour, which was amazing to me. I always thought that outpatient procedures, might take all afternoon. I'd be sitting around all day. Did not see any of that. It was, really amazing.
Yeah, there's a whole nother dynamic beyond that on why this is a good setup. But I do think it's a great setup because huge exposure for something like BrainFM, so we can really prove this concept. So let's get into it. What in the world is BrainFM? How does it work? He's rubbing his hands together.
Here we go.
All right, before you even get into this, let's at least, I love being around. I love being the stupidest person in a room. And yesterday, I just felt like I'm just like playing catch up with Kevin all day long. It's just that you are wicked smart and certainly have the credentials to prove it. And the way your passion towards this, the whole story. So before we even get into the science, one last time.
I was trying to follow the flow here.
How in the world did you become a PhD in this? Like, what is the path for that?
Sure. Well, let's see. I was first interested, I think, in the study of consciousness. I wanted to understand subjective experience, why it is the case that we should experience anything at all rather than nothing. Why isn't it the case that humans are simply zombies with nothing on the inside but, objects in the world, that kind of thing? Well, it turns out it's hard to make a living as a consciousness researcher. But it is possible to make a living as an attention researcher. And of course, attention and consciousness are very closely linked, at least in the sense that you tend to be conscious of what you're paying attention to. So I went into attention research in neuroscience. And within attention, I went into auditory research. Being a lifelong musician, just interested in sound in general, there's something magical about sound, right? It's ephemeral. You don't see it. It's in the air. And yet it's so important to our daily lives, as you're experiencing right now. And so there's this magic about it, and I wanted to understand, the principles of how do you attend to sound in the world, right? And often we're in these situations where we're trying to listen to the person talking to us in front of us, but there are other people talking around us, right? Or maybe we're on a busy street corner, or say we're listening to a piece of music and just trying to hear the guitar part but ignore the drums. And so there's this notion of a spotlight of attention in listening to things, right? And with the eyes, it's simple to understand how that happens because you can move your eyeballs around and you can point your eyes at things, right? Well, we don't point our ears at things. We do that with our brain, right? And so if I'm sitting at the dinner table and I want to listen to the person next to me instead of the person in front of me, I don't have to turn my head to do that. I do something in my brain, right, that changes the spotlight of my attention so that I'm eavesdropping, right? And what is that process? How does that work? So I became very interested in that. Studied it in undergrad and then went on to grad school. Did my dissertation on something called the cocktail party problem, which is exactly the problem I've just described. And again, the eyes being a two-dimensional sheet, objects already arrive on the retina separated, right? But the eardrum is not a two-dimensional sheet. The eardrum is a one-dimensional receiver where you just get pressure over time. Sounds mix in the air before they arrive at the ear, and it's the brain's problem to unmix those sounds, right? It's an absolutely fascinating computational problem. So I studied that for 7 years. And in the process of doing that, developed some methods to do online auditory experiments, which hadn't been done before. And long story short, the old guard in auditory computational neuroscience would have said, oh, I have to bring people into my sound attenuated chamber. I have to make you wear my calibrated headphones, and therefore I can only run 2 subjects a day. Well, it turns out that if you do things online and you use the right methods, you can collect 100 participants a day, and the data ends up being roughly the same. With a few more participants, you can even out the noise that's otherwise introduced by slightly messy online methods. It turns out it's a massively more efficient way to run experiments. And one day, by chance, in the supermarket, I ran into an old colleague of mine who was just so excited about these methods. I went on and on and on. And she had just hooked up with BrainFM. In that she was a consultant for them. She said, wow, BrainFM, this wonderful company, they're doing functional music, and they really need somebody to, as a team of one, to run lots of experiments, behavioral experiments, to figure out, what is the ideal background music for doing, X, Y, Z. And I jumped on that immediately. I started consulting for BrainFM even before I defended.
I'm sorry, what year is this, do you think?
Oh, this would have been 2016. No, 18, 19.
2018? Oh, yeah. Time flies.
Yeah. Because I defended in 2018. Yep. And so 6 months before that, I was consulting with BrainFM, and I remember the day that I defended my dissertation, I signed the employment contract with BrainFM.
Nice.
Very, very happy day.
You snagged him right out.
Boy, you didn't leave any room at all.
And the rest is history. And we've gone on to do some really incredible things. We got a grant from the National Science Foundation to look into music for ADHD. Out of that has come this beautiful piece of work that has behavioral experiments, has fMRI, brain scanning, and has EEG, another method of looking at brain physiology. And we combined all of these methods to essentially show how our focused music works. The results are really great. The paper is currently in peer review at Nature. We're really excited to see how that goes. So that's currently where we're at with BrainFM. I'm super excited to explain how it actually works, but maybe
since Ken gave us a hard stop there,
I should
now before we have to do that, we have to round out and ask Dan. Now, Dan, you had mentioned, maybe not on this podcast, my memory's already fuzzy, but you didn't found BrainFM, but you hopped on it the moment that you saw that there was an opening. So why don't you take over how you got here?
Yeah, so I have a very interesting story that's different than Kevin. So I started making websites when I was 13. I loved it. I thought it was like another kind of video game that you could play. And I am a secondary black belt. So I made martial arts websites. Made the first one for my school, and they went from getting 30 leads to 130 leads.
Sorry, as somebody that's done martial arts his whole life, what, second degree in what?
Mixed martial arts. So it concentrated in jiu-jitsu, Krav Maga, Muay Thai, and Kempo.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I need to introduce you to Drew.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while. And I went to make martial arts websites because I made it for one person. He's like, can you make it for all my friends? And before I was out of high school, I had 20 clients. Dropped out of high school, ended up having 40 clients at one time, and sold my first business when I was 20. Traveled the world and came back, and I said, I wonder if I can do this again. Maybe I got lucky. And I started working with businesses of bringing them online and building lead generation businesses, and started doing more and more complicated things like POS systems, started doing digital advertising, became digital director of a company at like 24 years old. And from the outside, I made it. I was making more money than my parents, like traveling around the United States, selling $1 million contracts. But I hit this point where I didn't feel like I was really like helping people like I did when I was teaching martial arts. Because we used to use martial arts as a vehicle to take a kid from being not really confident or sure of himself into a leader, into being someone. And I'm an effect of that. I was really shy. I got bullied on mercilessly in 5th grade. I was a little chubby, and martial arts transformed me. So even though I made success financially, I didn't really find success personally. And, I had this life or death situation, which is a whole nother podcast to talk through. And I realized I need to quit my job. Came across BrainFM like 3 months later when I was looking for what I should do. I knew I wanted to work in tech again to help people. And I remember using it the first time and being blown away because I used to work from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. because that's where I could find my flow state, right? Like I could find that magic zone where I could just jump into things. And I remember taking my headphones off the first time and being like, this is too good to be true. This is no way this is working. I was super speculative and I was, this is just music, right? And I remember I stayed up 24 hours and then used it, still worked. I changed my diet, still worked. And it was perfect because it was something that allowed me to switch into focus whenever I wanted to. And from then I was like, this is going to be something that changed the world. I called the people that created the company like 12 times. I actually started working for free, ended up starting to lead the tech team, becoming CEO, and then purchasing the company. So wild ride, never intended to do that. But along the way, obviously Kevin and I are together, as well as a lot of other great team members. We're really trying to use BrainFM as a tool to help people be their best self, their best version of themselves. And while we are doing that consumer, now we get to do it in the medical space and help people have best health that they can have. And that's something we're really excited about.
It's awesome stories. And y'all linked by passion, which I find really endearing for the process. So
we're doing, at Atrantil, and certainly with the practice and everything, we really like to discuss what is our collective why. What is my why? What is the company's why? If we're all on the same why, and what I'm just hearing, I'm just writing little notes here where I'm like, wow, both you guys driven by the why of, you have this knowledge, Kevin, that you are like, wow, this could really, I come from this music background and I understand this and I can do this. And Dan, you have this incredible, like, this is where I came from. It's not a money thing. The why is, how do we get everyone else on the same page? And we hooked up because we were in that car that one day. We were being shuttled to the meeting we were going to. And the why was, wow, that sounds like that could really help my patients. And you're like, the more I think about it, I think I can. And I like when the whys align.
Yep.
And you can move that forward and get more people doing it. The beauty of BrainFM is that you can teach people that they are capable of their why. So they can unleash that. So when I meet with so many people that have irritable bowel syndrome, which is associated, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, where they're kind of consumed by negative thoughts and anxiety. And there's that brain-gut access that Kevin's nodding because he's like, that's definitely the cool part. So I want to affect the brain by protecting the gut. Kevin knows so much about the brain that we realize we're kind of meeting there. So I think that this collective why, if we could expand this circle of why into, okay, we now know that AmSurge and Envision is getting the why. They're like, yes, we can do this. And now we can get the why going with the doctors going. We all can have this collective why, which is one thing. How do we get more people to have a better experience in healthcare and ultimately collectively improve the health of everyone? You guys are doing it through the brain. I'm trying to do it through the butt. So...
yeah, both ends.
Yeah. So I love hearing that story. I didn't know that. I mean, we've talked for hours and hours. I did not know. That's a really, really cool story.
Well, just a brief primer on how we all linked up then. I mean, because you just barely hinted at it, is you and I had met in snow skiing together. You were snowboarding, I was snow skiing, had a great time. And then we decided to ride together for the summer meeting to the same group and share a shuttle. No pretense at all. We just got hopped into conversation about how are things going, and it probably took about 10 miles of a 70-mile ride before we determined, wait a second,
there's something here.
There is something here.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's just my short version on how I showed up here today.
I love it.
Anyway.
I love it. So I guess without further ado, should we talk about what's here and talk about some of the science?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Finally. All right.
Now we're going to get into some cool stuff. All right. This is, if you're listening to this, get a pen and a piece of paper out, because this is cool stuff. This is not just listening to music. I love it.
Absolutely. And so the trick with this is always to make it, straightforward and understandable, and hopefully you won't need pen and paper deeper to understand what's going on here. So simply put, a lot of neural activity is rhythmic, right? These rhythms, slow, fast, everything in between. And the rhythms in the brain support perception, cognition, and action, essentially the three things that the brain does. One that you may have heard of are delta waves when you're sleeping. That's probably the most common, widely known one. But there are rhythms at all sorts of different speeds that support pretty much anything that you're doing in your daily life. And the idea behind BrainFM is it's music that's specifically engineered to drive these rhythms in the brain, called neural oscillations, or if you like, brainwaves, to drive your brainwaves in targeted ways, right, to support whatever you need to be doing, right? And so, for example, we know what brainwaves in the focused brain look like. They're at particular speeds in particular regions. And so what we do is we say, okay, let's use the auditory system as input for neuromodulation, right? And so how can we use an auditory input to drive your brainwaves into the state that we know supports focus, right? And so we figured that out, and that's what we have our paper that's coming out shortly on. But because the principle is using the auditory system as a neuromodulator, it's not just a one-trick pony, right? So we can support focus, we can support relaxation, we can support sleep, and now we're discovering that we can, support people going under and waking up from anesthesia as well. So it's a delivery method for, driving your brain into whatever state you need for what you need to be doing, right? And so again, this is, it's what we call functional music, which we like to make the distinction between that and, what you might call art music with a capital A, right? Which is that, in modern times with artists and albums, there's a conception of music as something that primarily exists for self-expression and for beauty and to connect to your audience. Well, things haven't always been that way, right? And if you go back 500 years, 1,000 years, it's not about artists and albums. It's about music that is designed to do things for people. For example, a lullaby. A lullaby is a perfect example of ancient functional music because the point of a lullaby is not to sound beautiful. Maybe you also want that, but the point of a lullaby is to put a baby to sleep, right? And similarly, you have music that was used to help people do physical labor, right? Or music to march to if you're in an army, right? And the point of marching music is not to sound beautiful, it's to make people walk in lockstep, right? Another great example is dance music, right? And dance is a perfect example of this principle of rhythms in the brain and rhythms in the world, which, by the way, is called entrainment. That's a concept that you may be familiar with, which is that rhythms in the brain reflect rhythms in the world.
Okay, just real quick. So
that one,
catch up.
That one threw me off a little bit.
Sorry.
Just to catch up on everyone on the vocabulary, I want to hear your just brief explanation of neuromodulation, of entrainment, and is there another? It seems like there might have been one more, but just to keep everybody on the same page.
Sure. So neuromodulation is just a broader term that refers to inducing a change in the brain through an external stimulus.
There we go.
It could be a magnetic field, it could be electrical currents, but it could also be sensory stimulation, right? In this case, auditory system. Entrainment is a form of neuromodulation where you're providing a rhythmic input to induce a rhythmic response from the brain, right? And so you have this oscillating system, neural circuits have their resonance frequencies, and so you're basically pushing on this neural circuit in a rhythmic way, and it responds in a rhythmic way. And because the brain has this property of entraining to things around it, then you can drive the rhythms in the brain to help support what you need to do, which is where I started. It's pretty straightforward, and a simple example of that, coming back around, is dance, right? That's one that everybody understands. You hear the rhythm in the music, and your body moves to that, and that's entrainment in what's called the auditory motor system, right? And also, by the way, if you want to know how quickly does it take for BrainFM to kick in, which is a question that we always get asked, I ask back, well, how long does it take between when you hear dance music and when you want to dance?
Yeah.
Right? The answer is it depends on how closely you're attending to the music, right? It depends on how intense the beats are, and all of that's true for BrainFM as well. But, the real answer is maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute if you're not really listening. If you're in the right mood, maybe 10 seconds, right? But that's the sort of time scale and ballpark time scale when you're talking about rhythmic entrainment in the auditory system. And interesting thing about dance music, right, is that the functional properties of dance music are completely dissociated from the aesthetic properties of dance music, right?
Yes.
You can listen to music that sounds terrible and still makes you want to dance. And that's a perfect demonstration of functional versus art in music, right? And so what we've done in BrainFM is we've said, okay, we know entrainment is a thing, but instead of, relatively slow rates that you would dance to, you can actually drive the brain to very fast rates that support focus or very slow rates that support sleep. And that's
everything in between.
And everything in between. And that's the principle.
What's really cool about it as well is, in addition to all the things that Kevin is saying, we're also able to do it through sound, where it's something that is not obtrusive or stops from what you're doing. So, for example, in focusing, it's not something that you have to watch, or like meditation, you meditate and then you focus. This is as long as you are doing the activity. So what's nice about it is usually our work is visual. So by adding music to it, it's allowing us to focus better and work like we normally would. And the same thing in hospitals, right? And in the clinic that we were just at, is this is music that you put on top, and it doesn't take away from the experience. People can still, hear what you're saying, the instructions. It's not something that they're putting over their eyes. One interesting thing about music compared or sound compared to light is like 1 out of 18,000 people are epileptic.
Right. That light can occasionally induce epilepsy, but music will not. Yeah. Sound-induced epilepsy is not only extremely rare, but it's also not due to rhythms. It's triggered by, things that have to do with your past. So the sound of a car crash or something might trigger epilepsy for sound. Whereas with light, it's a very automatic thing where once you hit a certain frequency of light flashing, if you have that kind of photosensitive epilepsy, it'll set you off. Not so with music. So it's extremely safe.
Yeah. So sound is really this perfect medium to apply to things that we're already doing, whether it's relaxing, sleeping, or going through surgery. But it's also something that's incredibly safe because we have all of these things that we've evolved to have that protect us from sound. The worst thing that can happen is maybe it's too loud, but that's very that's actually not even probably going to happen because of the way commercial headphones are made. So it's a very safe thing to add to your regimen.
Yep. So what do y'all call this particular technology, and then how did you arrive at this technology? Because I know it's not the first iteration of utilizing sound. You've even said, it's been years ago from the lullaby to now. So what's this called that BrainFM uses?
Sure. Well, I think we like to call it BrainFM. It is unique. We have patents on the process that we use to make this music because it is so unique. Let's see. There are other methods of entraining the brain. For example, you could flash lights at people like we were just saying, but you can't get your work done if you're having lights flashed at you, right? There's a conflict there. So sound is a really great way to do it. I don't think we have a really name for the technology.
Let me ask you a quick question. So I'm somebody that's I own a different center someplace else. And I'm just like, oh yeah, I heard this podcast. You know what we're going to do? I love Coldplay, so I'm going to make everybody listen to Coldplay as they get in there because Coldplay does it for me. Explain the difference.
Yeah, so before we do that, I think, so obviously BrainFM as a company, we do have patents like Kevin was saying. I would just say that every time, the reason why we call it BrainFM is because every time we learn more, we actually grow and build and change BrainFM. So it's an ever-evolving thing. Where BrainFM was 5 years ago and where it is now, and our understanding of the brain and even the music we produce is different. As far as this, of what we're making for healthcare, this is really BrainFM Health that we're really focusing on as a pursuit. And it is different than our consumer product. And Kevin can share some of the things that we arrived to it. And actually, it's funny because Coldplay was one of the control groups that we did.
I was about to mention that.
So when we first started talking about, hey, I think this is something that we could do. I think I shared that story of my girlfriend. We were saying, I remember telling Kevin, I was like, hey, can we make relax music? Can we just play our relax music? And he's like, yeah, we could, but let me check. And he started finding all this research, which I'll just let Kevin say. But it was just incredibly exciting because from that start, we were able to eventually build a product that blew the walls off everything that existed so far. We can see that with science.
So that's kind of where I was going. So I when you and I very first got engaged with this topic and what BrainFM was, I think one of the first questions that Ken asked is, how does this compare to someone utilizing binaural beats?
Yeah.
And then that's really kind of what I was getting at, is that that is more or less, and correct me if I'm wrong, but static in where it is, and just as you described, y'all have been evolving and finding new applications for BrainFM proprietary applications, whereas binaural is a great discovery. However, y'all are evolutions beyond.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll give it to Kevin. So you know what, this, like we were saying before, has been tried to be done forever. Right?
Sure.
Functional music, lullabies, those existed for thousands of years, and then a lot of people are familiar with music that they play to elicit a response. So when you go to spas, you hear the waterfalls and the relaxing, all that, because you're trying to have a relaxing experience. What we've done is we've taken that to another level. Now, to your point, binaural beats, isochronic tones, those have existed for a long time. And that's when, for anyone that hasn't heard about this, is when you play one frequency in one ear and one frequency in the other, and they basically combine in your brainstem, right? And that it creates entrainment in your brain, but it's not as precise as what we're looking for. It still has effects, but they're diminishing, or they're not as rigorous as we'd like to know that this is 100% effective. So when we were creating BrainFM, it was, well, this is something that's there, but how could we make it more effective? And Kevin, I'll share in a second, but the difference between is, instead of modulating frequencies, we actually modulate amplitude. Kevin, do you want to explain that?
Sure, yeah. So I can talk about binaural beats specifically, and Dan is absolutely right. You have two different frequencies coming in the two different ears. The difference between those frequencies creates beating in the brainstem, essentially, that if you were to take two sine waves of slightly different frequencies, sum them together, what you would end up with is amplitude modulation, basically interference between two very similar sine waves. So, for example, I have 400 hertz in one ear, 410 hertz in the other ear. In the brainstem, I'm creating a 10 hertz amplitude modulation, right, due to a sum of those things. Now, the issue, well, there's several issues. One is that the brainstem is limited in how strongly it can pass those modulations up to the cortex, right? The cortex is the high level of the brain where all the interesting stuff happens. So even if you have, it doesn't matter how loud those frequencies are in your two ears, the level of modulation created in the brainstem will cap out at a certain amount. But if you put that modulation directly in each ear, instead of relying on the brainstem to produce it, you can get a much stronger response from cortex, right? So in terms of the strength of entrainment, and binaural beats is also about entrainment, right? It's about producing this modulation that then entrains cortex. The strength of that entrainment is much less in binaural beats because the modulation is produced by the brain instead of existing in the sound signal, right? A practical issue is that with binaural beats, you're limited to listening to tones. So when you listen to binaural beats, what you're hearing is in one ear and in the other ear.
I love that song.
Exactly. No one loves that song, right? And so what we've done in BrainFM is we've found a way to insert modulation into music, right, so that it's enjoyable and you get those effects as well, right?
Yeah, and we can send over a demo if you want to stitch it to the end of this podcast so people can hear it.
Well, that's honestly one of the coolest parts is the fact that y'all can put the effective portion of BrainFM inside the genre that anybody wishes to listen to.
That's right.
And it's one of the coolest things, because I was even asking you when you were first describing it, is it country to go to sleep, and is it hard rock to wake up? And you said, actually, it's whatever you want for anything that you want. And I thought that was the coolest explanation, because you're not limited to some type of genre just simply because that's how you need to feel.
Absolutely. And to be clear, most music is rhythmic, and therefore most music has amplitude modulation in it, but it's not targeted in the way that BrainFM is, right? It's a byproduct of the artist doing their thing. So if you're listening to Coldplay, right, They have a mix of whole notes and half notes and whatever, musical things are going on. And due to that, they have amplitude modulation at all sorts of different frequencies happening, right? If they're at, 120 BPM and they're playing whole notes, then they have, 1 hertz or whatever it is, maybe 2 hertz. But with BrainFM, what we're saying is, okay, we know the frequency that we want the brain to hit, so we're going to directly insert amplitude modulations at exactly 16 hertz or whatever it happens to be, and make those the dominant modulation frequency in the brain. Whereas with music, you have all these overlapping frequencies, and the target is to make it sound beautiful, not to drive the brain into a certain oscillatory state, right? And so, by the way, with Coldplay, we did this very large online study. We had 200 participants in this. We gave them a standard questionnaire called the Profile of Mental States, looking at, among other things, tension and relaxation. And we had Coldplay as a control. We had BrainFM. We also had another piece of music, very fascinating, that was made by music therapists and was hailed as the most relaxing song in the world. It was used in multiple studies. It was shown to reduce blood pressure to a similar extent as benzodiazepines for people undergoing surgery. And we found that we beat that. We beat Coldplay by a mile, and we beat that song as well. Error bars were small relative to the difference between them, highly statistically significant. So that was very cool to see.
Say that last part again one more time, because it's based on science. And what I said Coldplay kind of jokingly because I like Coldplay, and then didn't realize that they actually studied that. And so this was compared to a scientifically or supposedly scientifically derived music considered the most relaxing music in the world.
That's right.
You guys compared yourself. You just went immediately to the deepest water you could find.
That's exactly right. We did the hardest test. We always try to give ourselves the hardest test. By the way, it's a track called Weightless by Marconi Union. It's extremely Googleable. You'll find there's a CNN article written about it. And we said, okay, if this is the king of the hill, we're going to beat it. And we did.
Wow.
Yeah, and we do that from some of the things that Kevin was talking about earlier, which were there's online experiments. So think about it. We can actually test thousands of people, and we know all the knobs to play. So not only are we doing these neural phase locking, these amplitude modulations, we actually do other things in music, like 3D sound. So when you're in some of our relaxing music, we actually shift some of the sound from right ear to left ear, almost like you're in a hammock sometimes. We have different BPM rates, different kinds of genres specific to make you feel more relaxed. And as we learn more about you and what you prefer, we can actually have even a better response. And, getting back onto track on some of the stuff that we're doing with you guys and hopefully more people in the future, we started looking at this from a science-based procedure and saying, okay, this is what the world says is the most relaxing music in the world. Let's beat it. And I believe we beat it by 50.
It was about 50%.
50%.
Yeah.
So pretty demonstrable, especially compared to.
And just to clarify, that was like first iteration. You guys continually improve what you have going on.
Yep. And now it just comes down to, so we have improved it since, and now it comes down to doing clinical trials with real people to say, okay, we've improved it as much as we can outside the environment. Now let's make it better in the environment and continually test.
Something else that you mentioned, Kevin, that I feel like is maybe even just glossed over as we're talking about comparing it to Coldplay or Weightless, is you said benzodiazepines also. So now you're talking about comparing sound to a drug. And a benzodiazepine, of course, is what we use. If you're curious, that's Versed, that's Ativan, that's Valium. These are things that people religiously take as an anxiolytic.
That's right.
To stop that. So the fact that you didn't just go to the deepest water in sound, you went straight to the heart of what we use in anesthesia chemically to allow people to alleviate their anxiety. And I think that's quite measurable.
All right, so let's bring that up, because you said religiously take, but the reality is that benzodiazepines have an extremely addictive potential as well.
Correct.
So people that suffer from anxiety and using those medications to try and get through that, there are tremendous risks.
So, and before we hit on that, just the array of benzo and benzo-like drugs. I mean, it doesn't just stop with those three. You're talking also about Xanax. You're talking about Ambien, Sonesta. Those, all of those fit at some level to be maximum GABA agonists. So when you say that what you have by comparison is something that's effective, we don't know this today, but potentially y'all could be unlocking a way for people not to be dependent upon taking these drugs to get better sleep, to alleviate their anxiety, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a road that we see could be possible. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be involved right now, but we do have testimonials of users that like reach out and they say, hey, I haven't slept well in 10 years. And I tried BrainFM last night, and I've been on Ambien, I've been on Lunesta, and I slept better than any drug I've ever taken, right? And now I'm not here saying that this is a cure or a treatment.
Sure,
or
yeah.
that, but this could be an alternative approach where maybe you can take less drugs, or you can do this before you try drugs, or whatever. And I think that gives someone more control and freedom.
Totally agree.
As someone who tries to incorporate different lifestyle modulations to improve my life, to try and incorporate these different things with my patients, when we talk about, let's talk about benzodiazepine addiction, we can get into the fact that benzos work similar to alcohol. So I work with a lot of patients with liver disease, and we try and get over that. Well, the beauty that I really like about this is that, just like you said, when you meditate to try and focus, you are meditating and then you're going to try and have focus. What I love is I'll actually stack this kind of stuff. I will, and Eric's a big sauna fan also, and so I will put my BrainFM on, I will go into the sauna, and I will do breathing exercises all at once, and I love it. It is absolutely, I feel like I'm focusing on my breath. I know that I'm getting that neuromodulation that's going to happen anyways and start stimulating that area to try and do that. And I'm getting the benefits of the sauna that's there. And so we're not saying that one thing does something or other, but when we start talking about lifestyle modifications, this is like one of the easiest.
Yeah,
Because the other stuff, you need a sauna. Like when I tell my patients, I'm like, sauna therapy is good. I don't have access to a sauna. Okay. Let's do some breathing and some meditation. I can't. I'm super busy and whatever. Okay. How about just putting some headphones on?
Yeah.
How about that? Let's start with that and see what happens.
Yeah. And it's something that, one of the reasons why I was so attracted to the company in the beginning was this isn't just for, people that it is for everyone. It doesn't actually matter if you speak English or not. None of our music is created with lyrics. And one thing I think we glossed over is actually we have in-house composers that make all this stuff.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. So we have people that have toured with some of the greatest bands ever, which, I don't know if we can disclose, but some really great, talented musicians. And they're taking this and making this from a functional approach where it's music that sounds great. It's music that has all of these scientific effects and all the knobs turn the right way to have the effect we're trying to, get for the user. But it's also not necessarily music that is going to be your favorite song because that's not the goal.
Right.
The goal is to make an effect that can be measured in your brain and is not just sometimes, it's every time. Whether you're trying to relax, you're trying to sleep, you're trying to focus.
And it's music that'll sit comfortably in the background. So, for example, with our focus music in particular, a lot of people don't realize that if I'm a music producer normally, my job is to grab your attention. My job is to make music punchy and make you sit up and distract you from whatever you're trying to do, right? And so we flip the script on that and we say, okay, well, we know the tricks they're using to make music punchy and grabbing your attention. Let's do the opposite. What can we do to make music still sound good and be entertaining, but help you work by not distracting you, right? And because we have a different target than everybody else, we end up making different music than everybody else.
So figuring this out, now you were, some people say they're an audiophile. I would say that you are the supreme audiophile.
Dr. Audiophile.
Yeah, no kidding. But not only that, you also play guitar, and we talked about this briefly yesterday. So when y'all team up with your composers who come in-house to build stuff, just how does it happen? How do y'all know what sounds good for it to match together? And you're like, that'll work here. I mean,
absolutely.
Tell me about it.
They're much better musicians than I am, for starters. My job is to annoy the heck out of our musicians by saying, that's a bit too good. That's that melody that you made, it's too catchy. That percussive part, as normal music, it would be totally awesome. But right now, we're not trying to grab people's attention. And so just sort of to remind them of the science and the target and that kind of thing. But
So what's a session like for them? Are they there for like 4 hours and they're cutting one track, or?
Oh, they make enormous quantities of music. They're so good at it. In terms of a session, so they work in Ableton, you know.
Okay.
So they have DAWs. We have proprietary software that plugs into Ableton that helps us layer the science on top of the music. Essentially, that's what's happening. And the principles of composition they use from the ground up are meant to support whatever mental state, right? So, you know, even though I was talking about modulation, that's a layer that's added on at the end, essentially. But they'll start from a place of, okay, we want to make things fun, but not too exciting. You know, we want to make things slightly repetitive so that they'll blend into the background. We want to, you know, not have a bunch of cymbals and bright, distracting things. You know, maybe we want to slightly low pass, you know, bring up the bass and cut down the treble so as not to distract people. So they have all sorts of production tricks that, again, are pretty much the opposite of what you'd normally do if you're a pop composer.
And so for those who are just listening, you said Ableton and DAW, that you're basically saying that they use a digital audio workstation
exactly.
and they're collaborating from, I'm assuming, all over.
Yes.
To do that. Okay.
Let me ask one quick question. You use the term, we have proprietary software to integrate the science into the music. And
Correct.
so like as a clinician, I can confidently look at my patients and say, it doesn't really matter what you're listening to. It's the science has been built into that. Just choose what music you like.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why BrainFM works on top of pretty much any genre, because it's about layering the science on top of the music, right?
Yeah, so from a non-musical side, I like to think of metaphor as a skyscraper, right? So imagine you have a skyscraper where you have, the structure of the skyscraper, right? You have the different floors, and then you have the facade, right? And what happens is that the really important things about the skyscraper is really the structure and how it's built and how the floors and how strong the floors are, right? That's actually all of the science that we're putting into it. And the facade of the skyscraper, whether it's black or white or glass or not, is the genre that we apply really at the end, right? Because we can make the different sounds of all these different kinds of music and how it is expressed, but it still has all the core technology that is really holding the skyscraper, making it strong and eliciting that effect in your brain.
I think it's one of the coolest parts. I really do. Just because you can, and like I said earlier, I'll reiterate, it's people can just choose what type of music, what style of music they wish to enjoy and still get the benefit.
Exactly.
So it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a huge believer. Now I'm a bigger believer because I now actually understand it. I've just been doing it and going, wow, this stuff works. I don't know what's happening here. But yeah, but now I'm like, wow, okay. How many times when you're making music does somebody want more cowbell?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I'm always advocating for more cowbell. And then, my job is to say less cowbell.
Less cowbell.
That's a very distracting event.
Do you ever cut time with any of your musicians and
I wish I'm not at their level.
No.
They wouldn't
We have
let
Kevin
me.
very, very busy on other things.
Dan says no. That is not what we do here.
Take me an hour to do what they do in a minute.
Yeah. No, that's very, very cool. Oh, man. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I find it really fascinating. You know, there's that, I listen occasionally to it, the podcast, How I Built This, where you hear these people, where the story that came into it. To me, that's super fascinating. That's why I love talking to guys like you, getting the history. I did not know that history. I love that, where your emotional drive guides you in your past, where you're going, your intellectual desires with your ability to incorporate the music brought this together. Like, I don't think that, or maybe it would be just, it wouldn't be as amazing as it is, but the union of your guys's circles coming together and then doing this and the ability to have that, I'm listening to it and I'm like, man, they're just getting warmed up.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be the standard of care in our field.
100%. And another thing to consider, if somebody wants to utilize BrainFM, it's not, and before we get into how to find BrainFM, et cetera, desired equipment to listen to it on. You've got everything from noise canceling headphones. You've got earbuds. What are the bone rockers called that we used with the patients yesterday?
Well, we were using these yesterday, which is these were actually mine. We're using one that's Aeroplex shockwaves, which is really interesting because they actually don't go in your ear. They actually vibrate the. Well, can you explain really quick how these work?
Sure. So so they're bone conduction devices, and the idea is that you can transmit sound by vibrating your skull essentially into the cochlea, which is the organ of hearing, and you can bypass the eardrum. Essentially, is what's happening. And it's fascinating that they work as well as they do because the transfer function, the skull imposes a spectral shift on the music. And so what they've done with those headphones is that they've shifted the spectrum in the opposite direction. So after being filtered by the skull, you hear music as it should be heard, which is fascinating. I hadn't used them before yesterday. I'm totally sold on them.
I've never seen them either.
Yeah.
And the patients seem to love that. And conveniently, it allowed them to lay easily on their side.
Yes.
They weren't obstructive.
And to hear what's going on around you, very importantly.
So, you're exactly right. We were still able to communicate, ask them appropriate questions, but they were, if we weren't engaged with the patient in conversation, they were immediately back into utilizing the sound to their benefit.
Exactly.
I discovered these because my partner, Dr. Adnan Bader, who works with us, great gastroenterologist, he was wearing them, and I'm like, what is that? He's like, oh, I read this article that the earbuds, they trap bacteria, and people are getting, you can have this potential to alter your microbiome in your ear, and he goes, and I've just, I do this, and now I bought it for my father, my uncles, so he just bought a bunch of them and just mailed them to all his family members, and I was like, I'm in. I was like, classic Amazon Prime addict. I was like, what do they call it? Like, I've already ordered it. I'm just like, bought because I know I'm going to lose some, so I bought like 3.
Well, it's very cool. So what is the best way for a layperson, while we are getting things set up in the clinical trials, et cetera, to learn more and engage with BrainFM?
Sure. So someone can go to our commercial app, which is brain.fm, our website, or iOS and Android, and download our apps. We give everyone a 3-day free trial to experience BrainFM for themselves. I always recommend for trying it for focusing if you can, but also just relax or sleep, finding what works best for you. And again, we're so confident in our technology that's why we give 3 days for free, because we want people to experience it and integrate this into their lifestyle.
Fantastic. I mean, it's a really, really cool technology, top to bottom. I'm just so excited that y'all came down and that we had these kinds of responses that we were able to replicate. But I will say something, which I thought was really funny. Whenever we did our very first experience with allowing the patients to relax and then wake up, y'all sent Ken and I these gigantic briefcases of all these headphones.
Yep.
And we were trying them, I think, for 3 weeks or 2 weeks by the time we decided to check in via email with Dan and
That's why I lost
Kevin.
all my hair, actually.
Yeah, that's how you lost all your hair.
Oh, I know.
You know where I'm going now. And so basically, Dan and Kevin wrote to us and they asked, how are things going? And of course,
Well, hold on. These are really nice headphones.
Oh, yeah.
That came in these like crazy cases, which
like gun cases.
Yeah, they're like, and people that like have guns go,
Yeah.
oh, that's a such and such.
Yeah, I thought it was a badass case if that's all you had sent. But these were all pre-programmed noise canceling headphones, probably a few $100 a piece. I don't know. They looked really cool. But so they asked, how are things going? And you and I already knew they were going well. And we decided to write back, they're going awesome. And I can't remember exactly verbatim what it was, but
You're like, can we get more headphones? Because we gave them all away.
No, it was. It's working great. Patients love the headphones. Please send more.
yeah, please send more.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And in a very polite way, you're like, we can do that. But that wasn't the intent.
These were not single-use headphones. But we quickly bonded after that, and I think that Kevin realized that we are oftentimes full of shit.
Yeah.
We
Well,
learned
and I think
something,
I'm glad that they saw that pretty much everybody we work with is full of shit. So, everybody's on the same wavelength.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a Texas thing. I don't know.
it could be. It could be. But I thank y'all so much for coming down and being a part of it, embracing everybody at the Endo Center. I really think that the staff enjoyed the fact that y'all are on something so cutting edge, so innovative, yet it means enough to y'all to come and just really set yourself inside the environment, feel what it's like. And thank y'all so much for doing that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
pleasure.
Yeah, we've
Thanks for
learned so much. It's been wonderful.
My feeling is that your passion to see how this can actually help people is fantastic. And everybody saw it yesterday. You were talking with the staff. The nurses came out to me afterwards. They're like, that guy owns this business? And it's like, yeah, but he is legitimately wanting to see how this can affect general healthcare in this environment. And it's the same passion that we have, you guys have. I just like being around that kind of energy.
I almost forgot something. There's something really important, and you brought it up yesterday, and I had never heard it before, and this is for all the practitioners that are listening and could be interested. You had mentioned specifically that the sound was now comparable to another drug to essentially possibly cut down on wake-up time, maybe as it pertains to propofol. So let's talk a little bit about that, because it's actually a really, really cool feature that I didn't know until you said it yesterday.
Sure. What I had mentioned is that it was my understanding that propofol was an agent that had very few reversal agents, but one of the things that does reverse the effects of propofol is methylphenidate. Methylphenidate, of course, also known as Ritalin, is something that's used to treat ADHD. And of course, BrainFM's bread and butter is treating focus or aiding focus, particularly in people with ADHD. And so we're speculating that there might be, something going on there in terms of the mechanism of action in the brain of our focus music that might work particularly well for propofol.
So knowing that, and it could only be considered anecdotal to this point.
Yes.
But what we had yesterday were a couple of patients that we had to carry heavier. And I tried to describe that as we were doing that from case to case to case. But that we had to carry heavier, or in other words, I'm using more propofol than normal. And the amount of time from the time that Ken's finished with the procedure to our time to go and wake up, normally I would expect that patient to take a little longer to be fully arousable. That really wasn't our experience. And there were even those times that I would show you, it's like, look, I'm just not going to try to physically arouse or engage the patient. Let's see what happens when we get out to the PACU, the recovery area. And you can even attest to it, but patients just woke up very smoothly.
Yes.
There was no wait time. By the time the recovery nurse was there to take it, the patient was ready to engage, talk, discuss if they wanted something to drink. And they're well on their way to having the IV DC'd, as well as getting out of the endo center. That doesn't just benefit the patient. That benefits the person who brought the patient.
Yes.
Now they're not waiting longer. And the endo center or surgery suite, whomever it is that's caring for this patient, they've now got less time occupied by a patient that could be used for someone else who may need it. Or you might actually have to spend as long doing all of the cases all day.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was fascinating that was the postulated idea that...
Absolutely. And with what we know about how propofol affects oscillations in the brain, there's a theoretical basis for why this would work as well. So I think it works on all levels. We'll have to see if that's actually the case, but I think there's a good chance that there's something real there. And as you say, it's a win-win-win-win for everybody all around.
Yeah, so, you heard it here first. When we get this study finalized and when the study gets published, it'll be pretty groundbreaking, pretty cool. And if you're listening to this, and if you happen to be somebody in GIA or in AmSurge or in Vision or somebody that has an interest in this, you're hearing it. We have already shown on a pilot study that the patient has a better experience. The doctor has a better experience because it is a patient that comes in. The CRNA has a better experience. Post-op, the center, movement, it is literally a win-win-win. So, wow. This is...
I'm excited.
I'm excited. I'm excited to incorporate this on a daily basis.
And I think the coolest thing is it's super approachable. So it's not something, as we said in the beginning, that it's another drug or another thing you have to do that's scary. It's, hey, you're in a brand new environment. A lot of things are going on that are scary. But what is one thing that everyone is already familiar with? It's music.
Yeah.
It's just music 2.0 with science involved that helps have these effects. So the people that are willing to try it, it's going to be a very high likelihood, and they're going to get the effects that what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that I really like about this was Kevin's comment where he's telling probably some super accomplished musicians, hey, that's a little too catchy. Can you tone it down a bit? Guys, I stayed up all night doing that.
Yeah, I hope y'all save the the awesome tracks that you can't use anyway.
I'm terrible to them.
I make a lot of money doing this. And you're like, yeah, no, just don't.
Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. Kevin, Dan, thank y'all so much for joining us today. Brain FM for lay people, soon to be for healthcare providers. And this is episode 64. Please like and share. As always, check show notes. We'll have all the details how to connect with Brain FM. Dan and Kevin, and as well as some examples, I think that we'll be able to incorporate references. Hopefully, you're updated in Nature when that publishes.
Absolutely.
All this. It's really
so
cool
if
stuff.
you're a provider, gastroenterologist, ophthalmologist, anybody, or orthopedic surgeon, anybody that does these different procedures as an outpatient basis, take a look at this. If you're somebody who has anxiety, if you're somebody who has trouble sleeping, take a look at this. If you're somebody that knows anybody that has either some attention issues, anxiety, sleep issues, everyone can benefit from that. Just share it.
100%.
Just let them know.
100%. All right. Well, that's going to do it for episode 64. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye-bye.